There's a fairly high profile story that's getting shared around a lot in the comics world today from Business Insider, basically chronicling the career path of two black former DC comic editors who describe a pretty consistent pattern of racism and mistreatment from management. It's an interesting story. It is getting a lot of pickup. I want to go through it and kind of give you some of the highlights, talk about what's there, and really try and dig into, is there racism here? Is it bad management? Is it none of those things? I'll let you decide, but let's get into the details. Hey everybody, this is Perch. Business Insider published this story today detailing Harvey Richards and Lateef Williams, who both worked for DC in the editorial department. And basically, even though they had very different career paths, Richard was in the company for 22 years. Williams was only there for 6 years, and they both, did have time there at the same time. Basically both with the same kind of bad stories about what it was like to work at DC, and in particular, allegations of racism and mismanagement. Now, you should take a look at the story yourself. There'll be a link in the description of this video. You should kind of read through it. One thing that's a little bit, I think, just to call out here is that there's a lot of statements and history and pieces that get thrown out. And some parts certainly, feel like some racism was taking place, no doubt about it. Other parts feel like there was just kind of gross mismanagement in the company. And then other parts really feel like kind of the result of clique type behavior. Now, I've talked about this on this channel in the past, and I know others have as well, but in my mind, one of the most destructive things in comics today in this business is kind of its willingness on all levels to, basically fall into this very highly networked behavior where people are, cover for each other. They bring in their friends. They give preferential treatment to people they get along with and they like. And what's curious about comics is, in one breath, people will talk about how nepotism is bad and you shouldn't have that kind of stuff and everybody needs an opportunity. And then the next breath, people will talk about how it's a very closed community, so you better get on well with the people you're going to go work with. And if you're not saying the right things to the right people, then you'll be backstabbed. I mean, there's plenty of people at Marvel and DC that I talk to, and a handful of them get really nervous about, I want to do an interview with them. They're like, I just need to make sure, because if the wrong people hear that I'm doing an interview with you, then I'll be blacklisted. And so as you're reading through this story, that certainly it's centering and it's focusing on DC's problems with diversity. The story does make mention the fact that Marvel has also had some of these problems. It kind of skates around maybe the obvious, which is comics has a severe, clique problem. It has a severe, people cover for themselves, and it allows this behavior to continue. And keep in mind, this is a comic industry that on a regular basis will post pledges and other things, basically, wagging their finger at fans for being racist or being bigoted or whatever it happens to be. They're not wrong to call out that behavior. But meanwhile, simultaneously in their own house, they've got, creators, editors, all kinds of people doing bad behavior to each other. And in many cases, overlooking bad behavior because, they don't want to really rock the boat, or maybe they just want to keep working with the people they're comfortable with. So as this story goes in, basically, profiling kind of two different careers. In one case, you have Williams, who basically, only was there for about 5-6 years, never got a promotion, talked about how, a lot of other people came and went and passed them, and that was told kind of, that in particular, the guy who's getting a lot of call out in this article is Paul Levitz, who was a DC publisher at the time, and told basically that Levitz had told him he had grammar problems, and when he gave him an award, it was kind of a intercompany kind of good job award. Levitz told him, some people think you deserve this. And then kind of other confrontations when Williams portrayed I think a sitting governor or someone inside the comic in Impulse that Levitz said, "You'll never be promoted." And even after, basically that there was just this kind of continual picking and kind of downgrading of his talents. Now, here's the thing. Certainly, it's within the realm of possibility that Paul Levitz was being racist there and everything else. But what's also the possibility here is Paul Levitz is an asshole, which I think is not new news. This is not something that was broke today in 2020 in Business Insider. There's a long track record of people believing that Paul Levitz is an asshole. So when I read it, and I know this is a reaction of a few other people, I had two separate people mail this article saying, I don't know why everybody's worked up about this, because it's basically saying that people who everyone knew are assholes are assholes. It's like, yeah. But, if this article is really about terrible management from Levitz and some other people who are, have terrible people skills and basically treat, the subordinates and others like crap, then, guilty. Is there a racist component to this as well? Well, that's what this story is alleging. And there is something a little strange about the whole company and the fact that there's been a very, very few, Black or Latino people that have worked inside the company. Typically, you just don't see a lot of those people in the company. Go figure. And so, is it that the hiring practices tend to favor white people for racist reasons? Or again, is it that the hiring practices tend to favor, people within the hiring managers' networks, that they're reaching out to their friends, and it just so happens that that hiring manager is friends with people of their same race, and so that's who they hire into the company, and then that's how it gets established. Now you can go, wait a minute, that does sound like racism, and sort of, but it's also something else. It's a lack of standards inside the company that allows this stuff to kind of go on, and nobody really pays attention. And in many cases, not just goes on, but gets protected. I mean, the Eddie Brzezinga situation is a classic case of clearly there were problems. This isn't like a secret got broke open. I remember when BuzzFeed did the story, there was all these people talking about how, oh my God, they got a scoop. They did not get a scoop. This was very, very wide open information. It was just being tolerated. Just like there's things going on at Marvel Comics right now that are being tolerated because they're friends with the right people, and as long as they kind of take the same pledge with their coworkers, they're protected. And that's the problem. And that, by the way, just as a little side note, that's one reason why a lot of the creator fan dispute irritates me, because a lot of that dispute is people accusing one side or the other of things they do themselves, and I just for the record. But at any rate, we get into kind of more things. The article goes out of its way to kind of say, in recent times, Marie Javins, Michelle Wells, Daniel Cherry have all been hired in, and they've also reviving Milestone. So clearly, they're making more of an effort for diversity. But here's where I say, yeah, I think that's shit, to be honest. I don't really think if you're going to say we're going to have a fair workplace, and forget race and gender for just a moment, just say we're going to have a fair, good workplace where people are, respectful of each other, and we're not involved in nepotism, and we're making sure there's good checks and balances against things. If that's the goal, which I think is a good goal, then things like, hey, look, we're bringing Milestone back for a few issues. I mean, come on. I don't think that really helps anything. I don't think that a lot of people do things to kind of satisfy an article or the Twitter mob that don't really increase any fairness for the company. So I don't know. I always see these things tucked in here, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to be saying the same stuff again in 10 years. But okay. At any rate, we get to Williams, who was handed the book Impulse, and at least the speculation here is that Williams was set up to fail by Mike Carlin, and that people, assistant editors of color, were basically set up to fail and given comics that were doomed from the start. And maybe, I think there again, you'd have to go and look at the data and say, well, okay, so the higher profile books were given to the white people and the lower profile books were given to the Black people, and therefore, they were set up to fail. That may be true. I do not have the data in front of me. I know Impulse was a lower selling book, and I think to Williams's credit, Impulse became a pretty damn good book. It actually got to be a fan favorite and had some good pieces to it. One piece sticks out at me here because I know this story from a different angle. Williams said Carlin cursed him out for getting veteran comics creator Walt Simonson to draw 2 issues of Impulse. And he was wasting his time on Impulse when he should have been drawing other characters like Superman. So it just so happens I know a bit about this particular story. I do know that that is an accurate, or at least I've heard it from enough people to say that is a true statement. This isn't Williams making something up. But I also know from the other end that Walt Simonson wanted to draw those 2 issues, that he was interested in working on that character and doing that piece there. And so, the creator was wanting to do this. So that's an interesting little side note in this whole thing. But once again, I mean, if you went around and you asked for opinions on Mike Carlin, you'd probably get a lot of people saying the guy was a dick. He's now a DC Entertainment creative director, but this is another person who kind of has a long reputation of being a bit of an asshole, or maybe not a bit, but quite a big asshole. And also somebody who, often favored their friends. So, I don't know what to say about that. So at any rate, they talk about how, as time goes on and Williams has his career, but Carlin is, saying, I had my doubts about you, but dude delivered. Everything is always on time. It sells. Critics liked it. Williams thanked him for a promotion and then was told he wasn't getting promoted. He was just being put on Wonder Woman. The article talks about Williams being put on one of DC's best-selling comics at the time, Wonder Woman. I'm going to say no to the best-selling part. During this time period we're talking about, I'm not sure best-selling is correct, but okay. At any rate, then at the end of his career, basically he was put on a PIP, which is a performance improvement plan, or as they were calling it, a zero tolerance probation. This was also news last year, or at least this was an open secret. People knew about this. Talked about how Richards had poor time management skills and inability to meet deadlines, and and all the rest, which was kind of crap. I mean, maybe not kind of crap. I mean, a lot of the editors were having trouble meeting deadlines. That is true. A lot of the editors were also overworked because they'd cut staff. This was seen as unfair by people I talked to at the time, and I think it's still unfair today. But at any rate, he returned to the office from Thanksgiving, let go of the 6-month severance, told he no longer fit company standards. In hindsight, maybe that severance and that timing worked out pretty well, given what would come later in the year. But at any rate, it is Richards had a long career at DC, and I would say not like a huge shining star career. It wasn't like he was on anything of note, and perhaps that goes to some truth in this whole story, that you had Brzinga, you had other people who had much higher profiles much quicker. Some who obviously had the problems that Eddie had. Others like Mark Doyle, who rose through the ranks and had a pretty big career and managed a number of things as well. And you do kind of wonder what happened to Richards. You do wonder, was he just not friends with the right people? Was it that he just kept constantly being looked past within the network, or was there racism at play here? And unfortunately, you get into this, and it's like very much, there's some of these allegations could quite be true. There's been plenty of comments made throughout the companies over the years, and I guess that's why I know this is a bit of an odd take. When I look at this story and I read it, there's a little bit of a aspect to it. And I don't say that as to dismiss it, just that some of the revelations coming on the story are not new revelations. And here's the exhausting part for me, I don't see the company on any track to solve these things. They can do diversity initiatives, they can do all kinds of stuff, but does it really matter? Is it really going to create actual, healthier working place conditions? And I think until they solve that kind of nepotism network issue where people who are assholes are allowed to just kind of continue because they're friends with the right people, or whenever there's a problem, there's no real looking out to say, you need to improve your attitude, or here's some mentorship, or here's some coaching, or here's how we're going to make everyone successful. Until you have more of that kind of culture, yeah, this stuff's going to continue. And I think if you're going to patch on top of it, like, quick, let's hire 4 Black people so we look better, it's not going to help. All that's going to do is going to bring people in. They're going to wait until the heat dies down, and then they're going to continue on with their ways. I'll say it more bluntly this way. Comics has a lot of people in it that need to go. It's time for them to be retired. It's time for them to mosey on off into the sunset. And not for racism reasons, but just they're dicks reasons. And they're not bringing in sales. They're not bringing in new ideas. They're causing everything to be stuck in amber. And it's time for some people to move on. It's time for some fresh blood in comics. There's a lot of very talented people that get held back. White, Black, male, female, all kinds of things are being, their ideas are not being listened to because they're not in with the right people. They're not sucking up to the right parts of the industry. And eventually that's going to kill comics. Comics has had a very long track record now of having the same people by and large in charge. And the evidence is in what's happened. You can talk all you want about comics are doing great, and it's the only people that are the problems are the toxic fans and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But the house is not in order. This story is just one of many stories where it's clear the house is not in order. But what do you think? Take a look at this article, see what you think about all this. Again, I mean, I'm not trying to hand wave it away, but is there racism in DC? Yeah, probably. Is there, but more than that, is there just terrible management at times at Marvel and DC? Because Marvel, again, has the same problems. There's a lot of people in these jobs who do lousy, crappy things. And yeah, it is a bit of a litmus test when you see some editors or creators or people who work in the company behaving like complete assholes online. And maybe they share the same politics as you. Maybe they, you agree with that the person they're being an asshole to or the person they're screaming at is a bad person. That's fine. But think to yourself, if this person is willing to, out in public on social media, act like an asshole, then they're probably doing some similar things behind the scenes. And guess what? They are. Take it for what it's worth. Hey, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. But most importantly, thanks for listening.